Welcome to today's presentation of Planning for College Transition, hosted by Parents Helping Parents. I am Diana Marr. I'm an education and assistive technology specialist serving as one of your hosts today. And with me is Sunshine, who is co-hosting this event, and we have a couple other people helping as well. Our presentation is about planning for the high schoolers' college transition. Our special guest and speaker, Dr. Marcy Schwartz, is the founder of Thrive College Counseling in Los Gatos, and she will cover aspects of the college planning and transition process. Then I will discuss assistive technology that can help the college-bound student. Our talk today is geared for both the college-bound high school student and the parent. So let me first go over a bit about our agency, Parents Helping Parents. Our agency is in San Jose, California, and we support and inform parents and professionals to become empowered advocates for their respective families or clients with special needs of any type. PHP can help you understand educational rights, discover assistive technology, learn about transitions, connect with the special needs community, train yourself in person-centered practices, and more. We serve 5 counties in the greater Silicon Valley area of California. But if you need help finding the parent agency serving your area, we can help you do that too. Explore our website, php.com, for calendar and upcoming events, information, resources. You can sign up to receive our monthly newsletter and follow us on Facebook and keep an eye out for Facebook Live events. So now let me introduce Marcy. Dr. Marcy Schwartz is the founder of Thrive College Counseling in Los Gatos, California, where she works with students with unique learning profiles. She is here today to discuss transitioning to college for students that are able to do college level work, but may have some learning hurdles to mitigate.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here and talking with you guys about college readiness and the transition to college. So I'm going to go through a bunch of slides together with you, and I'll have some slides where we'll be stopping and taking a couple of questions. So you can, as Diana said, enter those into the chat. This is an overview of what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be hitting on college readiness skills, the difference between high school and college, choosing a college, and the college application. Okay, whoops. Here's college readiness skills. Okay, so we're going to go into those different areas, the self-advocacy, social, and living skills piece in more detail in additional slides, but I wanted to start out by highlighting a very important point from my viewpoint, which is that college readiness skills are very nuanced. If we say, oh, is a student good at self-advocating? That's a very broad question. And sometimes students are very good at self-advocating in some circumstances, but not in others. And so when we're looking at college readiness, it's not about checking a box. It's really looking at how students are managing their college readiness and their independent living skills in multiple settings under different circumstances. So we have a good sense about their readiness. So we could talk a little bit more about that. So if you ask most people who do similar work to me, and if you ask people in college disability offices, and you say, what's one of the most important skills a student needs to have before walking onto a college campus, most people would say self-advocacy. It's a very important point for and skill for students to have. And again, as I said earlier, it's very nuanced. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. So by self-advocacy, the ability to articulate one's needs and make informed decisions about what their needs are and how that impacts them in interpersonal, academic, and medical, and in those kinds of ways. So here's some questions that I think about and will ask families and students. Can the student consistently, and I mean that word consistently, because that's a big part of working with teenagers is consistency, and in a timely way, identify when they need help. So to dive deep into that a little bit, if a student is having trouble with math and they have a math test coming up, but sometimes they'll ask for help, sometimes they won't, we just don't know, that makes it hard to understand a student's readiness. But if they will ask for help just the day before the test, then that's kind of not helping us out with the timely. So we need consistently asking for help, and knowing when to ask for help are really important parts of the self-advocacy piece. And that would go for academics as well as social emotional things. So for example, if a student is having difficulty with a roommate, will they wait till they're really frustrated with the roommate, or will they in a timely way seek help? So that self-advocacy, the consistency and the timeliness is very important. And then do they have the ability to communicate their needs to appropriate people? And communication skills are tricky for many students, and they may feel comfortable communicating to one or two people, but not to everybody. And if those one or two people are not near the student, the question is, will the student still communicate their needs? So the self-advocacy of asking for help comes with these other pieces to it. Let's see. Okay. Social skills is another area of college readiness, being able to manage their interactions with their roommates, their classmates, professors. You know, I've worked with students who they would get, upset with professors who might say something wrong, or, just somehow bothered the student. And it would be very understandable why the student would be upset, but it was hard for them to manage their emotions with the professor in the class. And those become very challenging moments when a student is in college. So being able to manage their communication skills and their emotions is important. Obviously, nobody is perfect, and it doesn't happen, amazing all the time for any student, but these are skills to be thinking about. Around communication, how comfortable is the student communicating with familiar people? And the bigger piece is how comfortable are students with unfamiliar people? And when I'm working with students, I'll often ask if they had a challenge with something in a class, say with their English teacher. Do they feel comfortable talking to that English teacher? And they'll say, yeah, I could do that. And then I'll say, if there was a substitute in that class and it was somebody you didn't know, how comfortable do you feel communicating? And those kinds of questions really help us know where the student might need a little bit of practice before going off to college. So those kinds of questions that I'm presenting in the slides are good to practice before the student goes off to college. And another area to focus on in the readiness is the independent living skills. Personal hygiene is a big one. Managing showers, brushing teeth, that kind of self-care without prompting is an important piece. If students take medication, will they take it consistently? And that consistent piece is, I was just talking with a family and they said, I was asking about the medication and they said, yeah, 90% of the time. Well, that's awesome. That's 90%. That's really good. But before that student goes off to college, remembering to take that medication really as close to 100%, as frequently as possible, as properly as possible. That's something to really feel confident about before the student goes off to college. Another big issue around college readiness is managing internet use. And there's many families that I work with where the families turn off the internet in the whole house. And that's the way that they're managing the internet. And that's not going to be possible in a dorm situation. So that's an important piece. With the student, a question that I'll often ask is, what would happen if the student is left alone and the parents go away for a weekend? And will the student shower and eat? And, it's a great question to ask because I get many looks from the parents. Sometimes people just crack up laughing like that. Yeah, the dog wouldn't get fed, or other things might happen. And all of these questions and areas of focus that I'm looking at, it's really around the college readiness to figure out what do we need to work on to be college ready? Because most of our focus has been around academics and getting students the grades, the testing, and all of that. And in many families that I work with, these pieces that I'm bringing up and just diving right into are not prioritized necessarily. For some families, they may be, but for many of the families that I see, they're often not. And so now when we're starting to think about college, this is the time to really bring up these issues, start talking about them, and start working on them. And another issue around the independent living skills is the parental scaffolding. A piece of that is oftentimes parents and students don't realize how much scaffolding is in place. The tutors that show up without the student having to ask for them, the tutors might be guiding the student around the work that they need to do. But in a college setting, the student's going to have to show up for the tutoring and verbalize the help that they need. And building that transition for the student taking more responsibility for the tutoring and the help they need, as opposed to it just showing up for them. That's another piece of this college readiness part. So now that I've laid out those areas of what I look at in working with students to build their college readiness, now the big question is, well, how am I going to work on all of that? And that's really where we want to focus. So the first thing that I would suggest is that families really start to think about, I mean, it often comes starting with the parent. I'll have families write down, just keep a list of all of the prompting and scaffolding that they do for a couple of days. Nobody likes it when I ask them to do that, but it proves to be very helpful because we're so not aware of all of the prompting that goes on. And this is something you should do with the knowledge of the student. So the student knows that you're doing this, your child. And then there's usually a discussion afterwards. Well, I didn't realize that I have to wake you up 3 times before you get up, or that I'm prompting you to come to all of the meals. Let me set a timer and tell you so you can come to the meals on your own. So without that baseline and sharing with the student about what's expected, it's hard to move forward. So that's a really nice way to start building these readiness skills. And then having a detailed conversation around the day-to-day routines. So you want to not bite off too much that, initially, but choosing one part, like a morning routine, an evening routine, homework, those kinds of things, and finding ways where the student can be given resources to become more independent in those areas. So just taking homework as an example, if a parent is primarily, or maybe even a tutor, is kind of working with the student and getting out their homework and kind of managing that for them, you might want to set up some goals where we're going to say, okay, you're going to sit down and pull out your homework and you're going to let me know what you need to do. And so just slowly carving off pieces for the student to work on. And then it's all under the conversation of, but this is a skill you need to you need to have in order to go off to college. And so the goal is really just to break it down into manageable pieces for the student to start building these skills. But my initial slides were really creating awareness about the skills that the student needs to have in those areas. I'm hoping that makes sense. So does anyone have any questions about that college readiness piece? I know it's a lot of information, but Sunshine, does anyone have any questions coming in?
Currently, I don't have any that haven't been answered.
Awesome. Okay, we can always come back. Okay, let me see if I can. Okay. So having that part in our minds about the college readiness piece and areas to work on, and if questions come up, I can go into more details about some of those areas. There's so much to cover on this topic of just all of the things that I want to talk about today. I think it's important for us to discuss how high school is different from college. And it's great for students to hear this as well as parents to really understand what's coming up. So I have more slides that are going to go into more detail on this, but I really want to focus on the success versus access, because it's a very important point that actually I can even move to another here. So in high school, you'll see, I'm sure most of you have experienced, where it's the adults in the student's life that has been rallying around. So when you go to an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting, that it's the teachers are there, the parents are there, it's the adults who have called the meeting, the adults who identified the challenges. Maybe the student has contributed in that in some way, but it's primarily run by the adults and identified by the adults in the room. And the goal of high school is to create a successful academic experience for that student. And that's why that's the job of the adults in the room, to create that environment. So if a student needs breaks from the classroom and that'll allow the student to have more success, then that is going to be on the IEP. It's with the success of the student in mind, and it comes from the adults. In college, it's very different. That colleges still want students to be successful, but it falls upon the student to manage the things that they need to be successful. And the people around the college's job is really just to provide access. And that is a big shift depending on the student and what their needs are, as they move from high school to college. So an example of access is it's working with, so if we have a student who's visually impaired, for example, because it's really easy to see access with that if they, in order for the college to give access to that student, they're going to have reading material that student can access. And that is the college's responsibility to make sure that student has access to that resource so that they can read the material. But they don't need to walk around the campus, look for people who are visually impaired, pull them in and say, hey, we want to make sure you're successful, let me help you. It's going to be the student walking into the disability office and saying, these are my challenges, I need these resources so that I can make myself successful in college. So the whole process is different. The school in high school, the school has primary responsibility for arranging the accommodations. In college, the student bears the primary responsibility. So we'll talk about how the student gets accommodations, but once they have accommodations, they need to go and inform each professor. So if they have a math class and an English class, their first semester freshman year, and they're getting extended time on tests and tests in a quiet room, the student needs to let those teachers know that they have those accommodations, and then where they're going to be taking their tests, and they work it out with the disability office to figure out the details of it, but it's the student who does that. And then when that semester's over and they start a new semester with different professors, then they have to do the same thing again. And it continually falls upon the student to advocate for those resources, which you can see is really the opposite of what happens in high school. In high school, parents have access to student records and can participate in the accommodation process, and parents do not have that access in college. There are FERPA waivers, and there's other things to be discussed at a different time that parents can have some access, which is oftentimes a good idea. But in general, in the day-to-day, it's the student who has the responsibility for advocating. It's not the parents. In high school, teachers can modify a curriculum and say, for example, I think that, this student really knows the math. The teacher assigned 50 math problems. The student only has to do 20. That's a change that can be made in high school. Another change is that you can read a different book. Every rest of one class is reading. The class is reading one book, but because of the students' needs, they're reading a different book and they change their curriculum. That's fine to do in high school, depending. There's lots of nuances with that, which I'm not going to get into, but professors are not required to alter the curriculums or assignments at all. They might, depending on the teacher and the topic and their work with the disability office and the student and the unique circumstances, but as a rule, they do not have to do that because it's supposed to be an equal playing field of all the students are being given access to the same learning experiences, and they're going to be graded based on the same expectations. Another big difference in high school is that tutoring or study support. Many of you might have a study skills class, and that's provided through your IEP or 504 plan, or maybe not, maybe you just have that, but that's part of the high school experience. In tutoring, in college, there's tutoring available in some schools 24 hours a day, depending, if it's near finals and all. It's not an accommodation. You just need to go seek it out. There are some colleges that have specialized tutoring. They have more educational specialists, and there are tutoring opportunities available outside of the regular tutoring that's available to all college students. But it's just, but it's really up to the student to find access to that. So those are just some differences between high school and college that are important to know. And then when you reflect upon what I started out with the college readiness and those skills about the communication, is the student able to wake up and set an alarm, wake up consistently and independently, and show up for class, that you can see is going to be an important piece of that transition to college. Okay, so then we look at what can you expect in college? So there are different levels of support within colleges, and we're going to go through those. Okay. So if a college receives funding from the federal government, which most colleges do, there's some religious schools with religious affiliations that don't, but for the most part, colleges receive federal money, and they therefore are required to follow the ADA and provide basic accommodations. So those are typically things like extended time, permission to record lectures, note takers, taking a test in a quiet room. Those are basic services of the disability office that you can find in most any school. So sometimes students that I work with that need more than compliance, but they really want to go to a compliance-only school, and that's all they offer. They don't have anything else to offer a student, and they're not breaking any laws by not having more. We will work, I will try to work with the student to find resources, executive functioning tutors, educational specialists, other folks who might be able to step into the campus and support that student. But then that gets into finances and other pieces. You're not going to be able to get it directly from the school. So as we talk further down in our, in what I'm going to go through and choosing a college, this piece will come up again. There are some other schools that provide more moderate accommodations. And those are schools that they understand that they're going to get all different kinds of learners coming onto their college campus, and they really want them to be successful. And they're not going to charge extra money for it, but they're just going to make their disability services more robust. We love those colleges. There's many of them, but what they add to their list of what they're going to do beyond compliance just is different from each college. Some will have executive functioning workshops, which are great. Some will have peer mentors where they'll match with an upperclassman, and that could be really great. Some of my students who struggle socially and they might want to join a club, but don't want to just walk into it on their own. They get a peer mentor. That peer mentor will go and join the D&D club with them, but nobody knows that is not their friend, but the student knows that this is their mentor. And so there are really nice ways that some colleges will work with students to help them integrate, and there's not an additional fee, but they do it more through workshops, and they will still have, it's still expected that the student needs to identify themselves with the disability office, advocate for access to those resources. So you still need those college readiness skills of self-advocacy, but then choosing a college that has that moderate level of support can be really nice. Okay, and then there are some other colleges that have more comprehensive support, and those are often fee-based, and they provide, it's almost like a giant resource room. You can show up there 4 to 5 days a week. They're expecting you. you come in with your backpack, just like in high school, and they know you. They're going to say, "Hey, Johnny, how was that math test? Great to see you. Pull out your backpack. Let me see what you have." And you meet with them regularly, and you show up for that. And they will often have more specialized tutors. It's not just upperclassmen who are teaching or who are tutoring and editing your paper, but it's somebody who real writing tutors and stuff like that. But each program is a little bit different. Some of these comprehensive programs are just for the first year, and some are available all 4 years. So there's a lot of, each one is very different. And some are awesome for some students, and they wouldn't be great for another student because every student is so different. So really understanding what the student's learning needs and the support needs that they would benefit from, and figuring out that and matching that to a program is helpful. They will often have separate applications. So those of you who are thinking about applying to one of these programs, just make sure that you have to get into the college, obviously, before you're going to be able to attend their support program. But oftentimes it's helpful to get those applications in at the same time. So if you do get accepted to the college, you know that you'll have a spot in that support program. So it's a great resource for families. Okay. I thought I had another question thing, but are there any questions, or should I keep rocking?
Yes, Marcy, there's a few.
Okay.
Okay. This is a lot of information. Can we get more examples how to create awareness of what child needs to do more for themselves when your child is already anxious and has maybe some low self-esteem and confidence going on?
Right. So how do you work on the college readiness skills when the child already is struggling with confidence? Is that what?
Yes.
Self-esteem? Yeah. So I will say that the work that I do is very team focused, and I will work with like many college counselors who work with students to find colleges. They work primarily with the student. I work with a parent as well, and really insist that they, in many times, are part of what we do, because managing and understanding the anxiety, self-esteem, and pressure that students feel is such a big part of this. And many times I'll suggest that students work with a therapist to guide them in this process. Many times, I would say 95% of the students that I work with have an executive functioning coach for that reason. Because I do give a lot of information, because there's a lot of information out there, and I will break it down in the work that I do. But then breaking it down even further into the day-to-day, which I think that question is going for, that I find works really well with an executive functioning coach. And sometimes that is the parent who can really say, these are the things that Marcy asked us to work on regarding college readiness. And then figuring out how to make that work with the student in a way that they're not getting overwhelmed. Many times it's good just to have a conversation with the student and being able to say, we've got this. From the parent perspective, or from somebody like me saying that, many times I'll listen to what the student is concerned about, and I'll say, listen, the things that you're concerned about, I get, but this would not be on my top 10 worry list. And I'll tell them the things that I would focus on, but not in an anxiety poking way, but in a way of really looking at how can we break this down in a manageable, doable way. And so going back to the initial slides that I had about college readiness, I think before you even think about it for your student, I would think about, from a parent's perspective, what do you think as the parent are the main areas to work on for college readiness? And then either you can start to build those yourself. And I can actually, I think there's another PHP talk I'm doing that's more just for the parents. I'm going to be breaking that piece down a little bit more. So maybe that's a time to connect. Hope that answers your question. I know it's hard because there's a lot of anxiety that goes with this process for the students.
Okay. one of the other questions was, can you talk more about accommodations that K through 12 provide, but colleges do not, such as speech, OT, one-on-one, and personal aids, etc.?
Right. So speech therapy and like OT and things like that, colleges do not provide. I am not aware of any colleges that will provide that. I do know that their students will have those, but then they end up getting them privately outside of outside of the disability office. It's not a resource that I have seen a disability office providing. Having said that, every child is different and every college situation is different. And I was just visiting a school, and their speech department is doing a tremendous amount of work with students with ADHD. And so they're getting speech assessments and things like that. So a school like that, that the student probably would be able to connect with the graduate student and work on some of those skills, but it's a giant research university, and would that be a great fit for the students? So figuring out that matching. One-on-one, well, there are colleges that do have one-on-ones, but it's very, the question is who's paying for that, and how are they used in the classroom and for what reason? So that's a very specific question. There's a difference between needing a one-on-one for behavioral challenges and there's or for like a physical disability. So those are going to be viewed different. And so there's a whole range. And then there are some schools that are going to be more open to it than others. So the one-on-one piece, I would say would be a conversation to have offline to figure out how, what is the reason for the one-on-one and how that would translate. But for the most part, for those questions, that list that you had said, Sunshine, I don't know that, that those things necessarily translate into colleges.
Okay. And then this is the last one I'm going to ask for now. It kind of, I think, feeds into where you're headed. What if you have a senior and you're just realizing they're not ready to go to college due to anxiety issues or medical issues, option for the last minute gap year? And then I'll ask the rest of the questions when we get to another break.
So, so if it's a senior and they've already applied and been accepted to colleges, and they're selecting a college, one of the things that they could do, depending on the college that they are selecting, they can defer for a year, which is really nice for a student to be able to know where they're going to go and start for the class of 2021, but have a year to build those college readiness skills. And that's a real nice thing, but that's very dependent on the student's options. If they were accepted to just, like none of the UCs will allow for a deferral, except I think Davis does now. If there's medical issues, sometimes that they'll make an exception. Most of the CSUs won't do that, but many of the private schools will, and some state schools will too. Like University of Oregon will let a student do a gap year and take a year for a deferral. So that, so if you're in that position and you can get a student to be able to accept and defer and then have a free year to build skills, that's awesome. And then figuring out the gap year program, we can kind of talk about that now. One of the things to think about with the gap year is, what does the student and the parent feel that the student needs to work on? I hear from families that might come to me after the student has already graduated high school, maybe did a gap year and then started college, and the college didn't work out well, and then they end up with me trying to figure out how to re-look at this. And what I see happens in that case is that the student took a gap year because they felt they needed more time to get college ready, but they didn't do anything to build those college readiness skills. They just worked at Jamba Juice, which is a great thing, but or they did a program where they went to South Africa and they built houses or did something, which is also a great thing. But neither one of those examples might have worked on getting the student to get up in the morning on themselves, shower. Maybe when the student was working at Jamba Juice, parents were still waking them up, making sure the meals were happening. And so all of that whole year for the college readiness and the building those independent living skills never really got practiced. And that was another year where the student is used to being helped with that. And then it makes the transition even harder, actually, to head off to college. So when you're thinking about a gap year, think about the skills that the student needs. So there are so for some students, taking, having a job could be great if that's really how their skill sets are going to be built. It's also really important if the student's going to be home for that gap year, for the parents to know what they need to do or not do in order to make sure the student is building those skills. So that's definitely possible to work on at home and build more maturity. But sometimes when students stay at home, it's hard for parents and students to break their habits of helping when the student really should be stepping up. And that's where looking at programs where the student goes away. And there's a variety of them across the country. There's some on the West Coast. There's not too many in California, but up in Oregon, there's a few where the student lives with other college-capable students, and they're taking classes, and they're working on building their independent living skills with coaches and independent living skills specialists with them. And it really I've seen students do that gap year, take a year in one of these programs, build those skills, and then go off to college and do really well. It's not inexpensive to have that, but overall, if the student is going to a relatively manageable college cost-wise, that money going into that gap year program to build those skills can be really great, because you're going to be really, increasing the chances of success in that college experience and then off to work. So those are kind of bridge programs that can be helpful. There are also more therapeutic programs if the student really is struggling with anxiety, depression, and needs more therapeutic help as opposed to just college readiness. Those exist as well for the same population of students where they are college capable, they have a school that they're heading off to, but they just need more time to figure themselves out self-esteem wise, anxiety wise, and get a handle on that piece before they go out. There's programs for that too. Hope that answers that question and this slide. Okay. So I covered some of this. Every student is different, and the student and parents should really be able to articulate the reasons for a gap year. So when I have families in my office now, I'm going to ask that. And it's important to be able to, for both the parent and the student, to formulate a sentence about that. Because if the parents can formulate a sentence about why the gap year is going to happen and what it's going to be, but the student can't, they're just looking at their parents and being like, yeah, what he or she said. That, at that age, now we're talking about an 18-year-old who's going off, and these are expensive programs. Like, it's important that that student really understands why they're going, and they're going to make use of it, because if the student's not going to be happy and doesn't really want to go, we may need to really look at it. So the buy-in of the student is really important with this. And so, it's just really about targeting those skills that the student needs. So I think we've just done some questions. Okay. So this is a fun part. Now we're talking about looking at the students' college readiness, even if they've taken a gap year, and understand the student understanding the difference between high school and college, what kinds of support programs that they're going to need, the comprehensive, the moderate, the basic, and we're pushing in others. So now we're going to look at the different things to think about when you're trying to match a student with a college. So the first thing is the academic fit. Let me look at this first. So the academic fit is, it's going to be really, where are you going to get into and where is it going to be a good atmosphere. There are some colleges that are very competitive in their tone and their approach. And that is a good fit for some people who do well with that. I'm definitely not that person. That would be a terrible fit for me. But for some students with that energy, that's what gets them going and doing their best, then that's fine. But just being aware that there are some schools that are much more cooperative, supportive, and that tone is, very important to be aware of the atmosphere, the learning atmosphere of the college. The financial fit is a big deal as well. Merit aid is a very important thing to think about. So the financial aid piece is really based on your income. You fill out the FAFSA, and then the school will determine what you're able to afford. If you go onto a college's website, there's an EFC, the expected family contribution. You can fill that out and you're going to get a sense about what kind of financial aid the school might offer you. So that's more that piece of it. But then there's the merit aid. And merit aid is different in that it's for students who benefit. The students who benefit from this are those who apply to a college where their test scores and GPA are higher than the average, and that college is going to really want that student for many reasons. One of them is that students' numbers are going to up the average of that college, and that's nice for the college. So everybody gets something out of it, but you can get some decent merit aid from a private school that will make it about half, and actually the cost of a UC even. So I happen to have my own kids doing this now, and I've seen that many of the colleges have offered them merit aid that will equal a UC. It's almost like they know that we live in California, they know we're considering UCs, and they almost give us merit aid to match that. So colleges will do that, and that's an important thing to think about. Many people will say, I'm not going to apply to any private schools because I can't afford it, and that may be true for some families, but for other families, depending on the student and their application pieces, it could really actually be less money than a UC or a CSU. So it really depends. And that's the merit aid piece. The learning style of the student is an important piece to think about. How does the student learn? A big piece of that is professors. So learning style, different colleges have different types of teaching. There's a school in Vermont that I'm a big fan of, that it has this upside down curriculum where the students start in their first 2 years are more the hands-on stuff that you would normally see in upperclassmen. And then you start out like that, and then you kind of do it upside down. You do more of the classroom stuff in your junior and senior years. And so that's a great program because it'll give students a chance to dive right into the stuff they find interesting and allows them to mature a little bit into the classroom learning. So there's colleges with the upside down curriculum. There's colleges that have co-ops and big internships. There's colleges that have very seminar style where there's a lot of discussion. And then you get your big universities, like go to the University of Wisconsin. There's going to be those are giant first year classes. And I've had students go there, and it's just, they were shocked that the professor doesn't know them. And there's students that, it's very important to know your learning style. And I actually chose my college for, this was a long time ago, but I wanted big lecture halls because I thought at the time, because I was 18, I thought it was awesome that I should be able to walk out of a classroom and nobody can say anything to me. So I chose big school and ended up working out fine, but that's not an awesome way to choose a school. But looking at your learning style and what's going to work for you is an important piece of looking at your college choices. And then obviously the supports that the student needs and would benefit from and what's available at those colleges. Now, with the families that I work with, because students change so much in the high school years, we usually cast a wide net and we'll have a variety of levels of supports available so that the students, we can kind of see where they get into, see what the level of support that that will be a best fit for them by the time they need to decide, like right now, this is the time of year when students are deciding, and then they at least have good choices that meet their needs in the moment. But we don't know what those needs are going to be, so we often will apply to a variety of supports. And then the overall campus environment, the city, is it too much of a city and sensory issues around that? Is it too rural and there's not access to additional support? So that overall campus environment is important too. Okay, did you want to throw in some questions, Sunshine?
Sure. I'm going to do two, because I think they kind of go together a little bit. Is there a directory to search for colleges by what they provide? And the other one was, is there a resource or list that indicates those colleges that offer higher level of disability support services versus a moderate level?
So there are some lists. I think I'm sure if you even Googled it, you would find that. And there's some books. There's I think the K&W it's called. But honestly, I don't use them in my work. I can understand why you would want them. And when I first started doing this, that was the first thing I said, okay, where's the list of colleges? But what I have learned is that it really ends up not being all of that helpful, because we find out, say, University of Connecticut, they have this really great program, but it's so far away, or it has this other thing that doesn't work for the student. And it doesn't matter that that program is so amazing, because other important areas are not met for the student. So even if it's like one of the top 10 schools for supports, if it doesn't meet really the nuances of what the student is looking for, it doesn't matter. And what I have found is that we're able to pull together a sense of what's going to be a good fit for a student and the schools that will be supportive of the student by looking at the whole student, not just what the disability office offers. And I will also say one word of caution is that that when the staff changes at a disability office, it can really change a lot. And I was working with a family that they thought they were going to go to a school. It had a moderate program, and I had talked with a disability person in that office previously. Wonderful, like was just a warm hug and really great. Student was thinking about going there. We're doing our final round. Okay, go check in. Let's look before they committed to. Still trying to figure out which school to go to, and then the parents came back to me like, I don't know what you're talking about with this disability office. I'm getting all of these mixed messages. And I called up and I realized it's not the same person there anymore. And so the whole tone of it had changed. And it's not a good or a bad program, but what I was thinking would be a fit based on the previous person running the program may not be a fit now, but it'll still be helpful for other students. But that kind of, and that was like a last minute change that happened. So there's no way to predict for that, but that's where it's it's based on relationships that you can connect with the disability offices. And that's where if you and your student really are liking certain colleges, I would say reach out to those disability offices, even if they're not on a list that I might give you or somebody else would. And if I was working with you, like I would call up too and figure out how to manage that. So that's the list question.
Okay. How can we encourage a student who does not want to access services?
Yes, that's very common. And many, many students do not want to access services. They want to go off to college, clean slate. They feel like they've got this, and they don't want to do that. They feel it's stigmatizing. They're uncertain about the confidentiality. They don't want anyone to know. It's understandable from the student's perspective. I totally get that. But that's where a lot of the education for the student comes in about the big differences that we talked about earlier between high school and college. And if I think about myself as 18, or if I was 18 and I had all of this information coming at me, I'd probably still want to say, I've got it. But really helping the student, whether it's talking to me or a therapist or the high school counselor, really understanding how the change from high school and college will impact them. It really depends on the student. And there's a bunch of articles that have been written about this and studies about it, because many students do not want to self-identify. And that becomes a challenge. And then they self-identify after they've bumped up against some challenges, and then they start to kind of manage that. And if that's what has to happen for the student, they're 18, that there's nothing that we can do about that. There are families where when the student is not getting the support that they need, and that tends to impact a student's depression, anxiety, and we're really concerned about the student not seeing the impact, how that will work if, the student's not doing well in school. Will they become depressed, crawl up into a ball, stay in the room, not go to class, and it really snowballs? That's when parents really need to take more of a role in this, and just talking to the student about your comfort level in going off to college and having them go off to college when you're concerned about health and safety and being able to manage that. So there's such a wide spectrum, but just the idea of not wanting to identify at a disability office is understandable, and we could just work and educate students. I hope that's helpful. Okay, so I will, Sunshine, should I press on?
Sure. One quick question, and we'll get back to the others, that just before we get too far, are we going to come back to the community college option with benefits and cons, like the pros and cons of maybe a community college?
Yes, I think I'm going to hit that soon, but I will make sure that we do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so factors to consider, and we can even bring it up right here, is the distance from home. So the environmental factor. So it could be a community college that's near home, or it could be like San Jose State is close to here. So that could be, it's not a community college, but it's still close to home. So those are factors to consider. And that's really a family's comfort level around the closeness to home in general. But to speak about the community college in particular, the residential versus the commuter campus is also a part of this. I'll handle that separately. So here's my thought on the community college, is that it is a fabulous opportunity for students. You get a really strong education. It's half of the price. You could do 2 years at a community college. And then if you follow a TED program and work with your community college counselor, you can have guaranteed admission to several of the UCs, but not all of them. You can also have some guaranteed admission opportunities at some private schools that can be set up for you. And so it's really an amazing way to get an affordable education that works for you. And then if you do 2 years at a community college, and say you go off to Tulane, for example, which is a much more expensive college, you're going to end up getting that same degree from Tulane that everybody else, even those who went there for 4 years, got at half the price, and nobody's ever going to know. It'll just see on your you graduated from Tulane, and that's it. And so it's a really wonderful option. So having said that, one of the downsides of the community college for the students that I work with is the social piece and creating community and working on the independence. So if a student is going to still be in a situation where parents are waking them up while they're at community college, parents are managing their day-to-day, it's going to be, not that you shouldn't do this, but it's going to have to be more work within that family to help that student build those skills even while they're at home. And that's oftentimes harder because of all of these habits. So that's one challenge. And then the other challenge is it doesn't, although it's called a community college, it's not much of a community. Many people work. There are clubs and things go on, but it's not the same thing as living in a dorm and having that community experience. And many of the students that I work with, they need that to practice that living independently and making friends and negotiating all of that. And they're just not going to get that experience for those first 2 years, which could be fine. But it's really student dependent on how is that family going to be able to make really good use of building independent living skills during those 2 years at the community college. So that's community college. Looking at other environmental pieces of urban versus suburban versus rural, it's usually the sensory piece that gets to students around the urban piece. There are some really great colleges across the country that are in urban settings that have really nice supports, but that's, again, going back to the list, like you meet a student, you're like, okay, you need really calmness around you, so Drexel has a great support program. It's very highly rated. That is not on the students list because just the sensory piece, and that's another example of the list piece. Weather is another one. It's so common, and students rule things out because they like too hot or too cold or no clouds in the Pacific Northwest. Those are the three things that those are the three main things. But, it's tricky because there are some awesome programs and colleges that are in freezing cold places. And sometimes we just have to let go of them. Sometimes, we can figure out how to make it work so that the weather is a big piece too and impacts those students' list. And then there are some schools that students have said to me, hey, I really like this school. And I'll, kind of do some research into it if it's not a school that I'm aware of. And one of the big things is that you have to be careful that they're not primarily commuter campuses, which sometimes happens at more regional schools. Even ones that are near, some of the UCs have more commuters than we would than other UCs. And so that really can impact students' experiences because if their roommate, and I've seen this happen more than I had initially thought I would, that their roommates go home every weekend and then they're looking to make a connection and their people around them aren't there. And that makes it hard for students. Okay, so that's the environment. Academic, having colleges with the students' majors is really important. I get a lot of families like, my student doesn't know what he wants to do or she wants to do. And there's different things that we can do to help narrow down interest, but there are many programs and colleges that that they don't mind undeclared students. They actually have a set of classes that they will go through, and they have a counselor designated to them to help guide them and figure out how they can take undeclared classes, figuring out what their major will be, and they give students really awesome amount of supports for those who are undeclared. Obviously the academic fit of GPAs and all. Other factors to consider are the appropriateness of the support, which we've talked about, the financial fit for the family, which we've touched on. There are some schools that do a really fabulous job with internships and building college readiness, job readiness, which is just so great to see. And so for those of you listening that have younger kids, it's happening now. So even if you have a junior or senior, there are opportunities out there now, but more and more colleges their disability offices are also working with the community that they're around and creating jobs and internships. So that is a big thing that's going to be coming in the future, which is really great. Some colleges have co-op programs, which are wonderful because it gives students hands-on job experience. But like everything, there's a downside to that. So there are some where the students will leave for a semester and go do an internship, great experience. But if if your best friend that you just made freshman year, first semester, and then second semester freshman year, they're off campus doing a 6-month internship, that's hard on some students. So it really depends on the student and how much they can handle that back and forth of coming and going. Different schools will be better fits for that. We also talked about overall campus culture and pressure and that piece. Okay. So when you're thinking about your college application, focusing on grades and exploring your interests are the main things. Just doing the best that you can academically without becoming overly stressed or creating anxiety, which I know is hard to do with some students, but your grade's the most important thing that colleges are going to look at. Making a plan for standardized tests and your accommodations, you need to do that in advance. So if you're a younger student and thinking about standardized testing, you want to make sure you talk with your high school counselor about applying for accommodations and getting that done a couple of months in advance of when you want to take the test is going to be important and be mindful of. Understand how ready you are for the independence of college. When you're creating your application, you're thinking about your schools, and then visiting colleges if possible. So many of the things that I'm talking about have just been thrown out the window with the coronavirus. So I'll just touch on that a little bit as it stands here today, but this is evolving and changing. So many of you might have heard that the UCs they're not going to be looking at standardized testing for class of 2021. And they're also making, they're accounting for current seniors and not being able to send in final grades. So there's a lot of accommodations that are being made for that. It's hard to make college visits. So if you're a current junior and you had wanted to visit, there's some resources that I can get to Sunshine. Maybe she can send out to you, where each of the colleges are posting in this one list where how you can take virtual tours. They have one-on-one conversations that you can have with the staff at the college. There's student panels that are being held and they're recorded, and you can watch those webinars where students can ask questions. So it's going to be different for you guys to figure out how you can understand what a school has to offer you and the ins and outs of it. But colleges are really doing a great job in creating resources for students because it is a tricky time. Okay. So college applications. So this list, the first one, the UCs, the CSUs, there's the Common App and the Coalition, and then there's institutional applications. So those are all different applications. So the UC application just covers colleges in the UC system, and they have a separate application, and it's for 350-word essay prompts. The CSUs, there's no essay. You just have to populate it and send that in. The Common App has many schools. Those are private schools and public schools. We'll take the Common App, like the University of Arizona will take the Common App as a public school, and then many private schools have that. You will fill out a 650-word essay, and that it will be for the Common App, and then you also have college-specific essays and questions within the Common Application. So Common App does a really great job in having tutorials. I would suggest that if you're doing this on your own, you just make really good use out of those tutorials, and parents be involved in this. I hear parents, it's an important thing to say, I hear parents saying, I'm just going to let my student figure this out, because if they're really ready for college, they should be able to figure this out on their own. And that's not what I would say. I would say this is a time for parents to sit with the student, to help them understand what's going on out there with the applications, what's expected, and then throughout the course of the junior year and into the senior year, back off as parents. But it's overwhelming. All of the different applications, all of the different steps, and many students, I think, would have a hard time. I don't care who you are, what challenges you have. Or don't have. I would definitely suggest parents at least partner with their students in the beginning. Coalition applications, another application similar to the Common App. And then by institutional applications, those are colleges that they don't take any of those. They have their very own application. So you just have to fill out theirs. Like Colorado School of Mines is one of those. You just have actually they might have just changed. But so there are more institutional ones. Plan time for essays. Many of the students, my current juniors, are starting to work on essays in the coming months. We get them done by the summer, and it's really primarily so to manage anxiety and not overwhelm students with senior year and when things are getting going. So I would definitely look at the Common App essays and the UC essays over the summertime to get ahead of that and manage anxiety. Letters of recommendation are good to think about. Not all colleges want the letters of recommendation, but they will. Some are going to want some. If you're just applying to CSUs and UCs, it's not necessary. It's really just for the private schools. But if you're, it's good to think about. And I would contact your high school counselor and find out, because of the coronavirus, when the school is suggesting that current juniors reach out to your teachers to find out about that. The application timing, there's early action, means that it's usually a November 1st, November 15th deadline, and you send your application in early and you find out early, but you're not committed. early decision, you send it in early, and you're making a commitment that if you get into that school early decision, and you can only apply to one, you will go there. And so it's a bit of a binding thing, and your high school counselor's going to have to sign it, your parents sign it, and you have to sign agreeing to that. And then there's regular decision, which the deadlines are can be through January, February. It really depends. So that's a little bit of college applications. Do you guys have questions about any of that?
Oh, there are some questions here. Let's see. I'm just going to go in order. Sorry. Can college readiness skills be built into an IEP and be done during the school resource room / classroom time, et cetera? And then there was another one that kind of goes on with that one. The parent says that we are working on a college readiness skills with our son's ITP, individual transition plan, goals that are, part of his IEP, he's a vocational goals that are addressed in his study skills class.
So I guess it's hard to know since you're just asking the question. So it's great when the student participates in the IEP and is, at 16 when it becomes transitional, and the student has a voice in that piece. That's really great. And it's great if there's a transitional IEP and that there are goals that are worked on at the school. That is awesome. The question that I wouldn't know, because every student is different, is are the goals that the student is working on through the IEP and at school going to be, like, if you think about there's it's a spectrum of independent living skills and college readiness skills. How close are the skills that the student is working on through the IEP to the skills that the student would need to be independent in college in, I don't know, a year or two, depending on what year the student is in. So it's great if the student has that in high school. But then the question is, how much additional work will the student need to be able to put in outside of the school and at home and maybe in the community in order to bridge that gap to the readiness in the timeline that the student wants to be in college? Does that make sense? I hope so. Are you still there?
Yes, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Can you please provide the name of ILS programs? I'm not sure if we have that available at this time.
Do they, like, locally, I guess they're saying?
It's just a broad question. So yeah.
Yeah, so maybe have them email that. I don't know if PHP has a list of ILS programs or if it's a regional center family that they can ask their regional center people, or actually your school, if you have an IEP, they sometimes contract out with some ILS folks in vocational rehab.
Okay, and that fits into the next question. When searching for these programs, are they called vocational rehab programs?
So there's Voc Rehab, which is separate from the college piece. There are workability programs that are in the community colleges, and you can get it in high school and the community college, and in some CSUs have them as well to provide more transitional skills and skill building for students. But they're not, I guess, you could have the parent, whoever asked that question, email me, and because there's not I call a lot of the programs bridge programs, but they're not, other people call them that too, but it's not like an official thing. And it really is dependent on what the student, the type of skill building that the student is looking for. So if a parent is looking and really asking, how do I search for skill building programs for students to build the college readiness as a gap year, it's very different than doing that as a high schooler. So it's hard to answer that question, but maybe email me separately and I can try.
Okay. And then the next one I have is, I believe some colleges require students to live on campus for at least a year. And there's two parts to this. Is this common to be waived for our kids? Also, it goes with, there are colleges in my area that require freshmen to live on campus. If the parents are less than 10 or more than 10 miles away, I live 15, can we get this waived? I guess so that's individual to the different colleges probably though.
It is.
And is this common with most colleges?
Yeah, like many colleges want at least the first year. Many of them want more than the first year on campus, depending on the college and the community that they're in. Many colleges are going to work with the student and have and not and they'll waive that, but it's a college specific. You can ask that prior. You can ask admissions that even before, like if that's going to be a make or break deciding whether or not to apply, you can even ask the disability office how they would handle that. But I will tell you, I have bunches of kids who have gone to Santa Clara, for example, where they get, I mean, it is a financial piece too, but if you take that out and just more look at the question, the students would live on campus during the week and come home on the weekend. So that makes it pretty flexible. And then it's just important to think through the reasons why. Maybe there are medical reasons why you're not doing it, with living on campus, which is fine. Maybe it's college readiness and all, but it really helps the student feel connected with their college community when they are living on campus, which is the main reasons why colleges want that, that they have that rule in place, because it really builds the student's ability to connect and it increases retention. So that's their thinking. And if you have a really good reason to not live on campus, I don't think they're going to argue with you, but it's good to know why they're saying that, which is really for the benefit of the student and the school.
Excellent. All right. And then we had, from when you were speaking before, which school is upside down in Vermont? Name, please, and thank you.
It's Champlain College. But there's that's one I was thinking about, but and so it's a neat school. They have a lot of the students like it because it has like game design and things like that. They even have a summer program too, which I guess would be canceled. But there's others too. So don't think like if there's one college that has a program, chances are others have it too. And that one's very far, and so you can research it and all, but that's the program that I had mentioned.
Okay. I apologize, Mark. Do you have anywhere else? Do you take a few more questions, or did you want to finish up with what you have in front of you?
So I could be done, and I know Diana's going to step in. So if we want to have Diana do her piece, and then we can take the last bit for questions for both of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good?
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Sunshine, for managing the questions. And it's nice to talk to you all.
All right. So I will switch to my desktop to share with everyone. All right. Okay, so thank you, Marcy. That was all such important information for these college-bound learners that we're working with. I know I picked up a few more tidbits for myself as well. So again, my name is Diana Marr, and I will be discussing with you assistive technology, or AT, that can be useful for you as a college-bound student. All right, so we will be reviewing an assortment of assistive technology options for supporting the college-bound student in the areas of reading, writing, math, organization, and discuss the importance of pairing usage strategies and habits with the implementation of the AT. So if you are on an IEP or 504, you might have come across this explanation of what assistive technology is. So according to the legal definition, it's printed here in the slide, but more simply said, it is something that helps you do a task better. And so it can help you in any one of these ways. It can facilitate access to curriculum, prevent a widening learning gap. It can motivate and engage a student better, perhaps build self-esteem, increase interaction with peers, and break cycles of failure. So the AT allows the student to better learn and demonstrate what they know. So while working with a 504 or maybe your IEP team, and considering assistive technology, they may have brought up this type of a template or something similar, maybe different, but this is called the SET tool. And SET stands for Student, Environment, Task, and Tool. It's an example of how a parent or a team can consider the individual student's need for assistive technology and work toward an understanding of what tool or system of tools a student can use to address an area of need. It helps anyone working with a student to understand the purpose and how to support the implementation of the assistive technology. So even if you're not on an IEP or a 504, it is a tool that a parent, or if you're working with a tutor, you can use this template and try to consider what kinds of assistive technology might be able to support you or your child. So now let's take a look at some actual tools that you might want to consider using. Research suggests that students with learning disabilities or some challenges in learning, they perform better when text is presented bimodally, and this is audio and text paired together. And in doing so, comprehension can become similar to that of an average reader's comprehension. So I should mention that I'll be going through these tools pretty quickly. I did develop a resource page that I will be posting to our Parents Helping Parents website. So all of the different tools that I will be describing by name will be listed there with hot links so that you can click onto those vendor websites and check out these tools for yourself. So, but if you wanted for now just to take screenshots or whatever, feel free to do so. So just about all word processing and web browsers have settings that can adjust and support readers. And so some typical settings to look for and play around with include the font style, color of the letters, background to optimize the contrast. Look at highlighting options and adjusting the print size and spacing of letters or words. Also consider adjusting the margins so that you can limit the number of words on a line, and that might provide for easier eye tracking. Text-to-speech, referred to TTS technology, is essentially where it reads aloud digital text. And this can be words on a document, on a website, on a PDF. It can be done from any device like computers, smartphones, and tablets. Text-to-speech is very helpful for anyone who struggles with reading, but it can also help kids with writing and editing and even focusing. Phones, tablets, and computers usually have this feature built in, so check the accessibility settings to customize them to your needs. There are online tutorials for just about every devices and app accessibility options. Just search for it online. If these built-in features are too basic and not supportive enough, you can look into a third-party app. And we'll go through some of those. So with third-party apps or programs, you can find some of these more supportive, more fully featured options built in. So if you look on the left side, those are the features most commonly provided in in more comprehensive support. And it might also have the supports listed on the right side. So we'll be taking a look at a couple examples of these supports. Know that there are many other options that you can consider in your search for the right assistive technology, and we are showing you just a couple as examples of what's out there. Also, if you have any specific experience working with these tools that I'm going to go over, feel free to share your helpful tidbits in the chat box, whether you liked it or something about it wasn't successful for you. You can also add that into the chat box. And if you notice, you could also save the chat for later, so it could be something that you review later on. Okay. So the first one I'm going over is called Snap and Read Universal. It's by Don Johnston. Its features include text-to-speech with dual highlighting. That means it can highlight with two different colors. So it can highlight words with one color and then like the surrounding words with a separate color. So it helps your eye to focus. It has a screenshot reader where you can select a section of the screen. Perhaps you're on a web page, and then it can read that little section. It also has the ability to simplify words. So perhaps you're reading some text and it seems extra challenging. And so that slows down your pace of reading. So you can click on the simplify button, which is like the little square and the little circle with the line bridge that goes up and across and down. That icon, if you highlight and then click that, or you click that icon and then highlight your text, then it will simplify the more challenging words. It's called levelizing the reading as well. Okay, there's also support built in for reading PDFs and websites. One feature that usually the high schoolers and college students really appreciate about it is the capture feature. And so that is the icon. If you see the scroll bar, I'll move my mouse right here. This icon right there is a capture button. It allows you to collect and curate information, so you can highlight something and then it will pop it into a sidebar and include the website that you captured that information from. So it curates a list of your resources while also noting where it came from. So starting a bibliography for you. Okay. So those are some of the basic features in Snap and Read, and it's from Don Johnston. Don Johnston's website is really good with having tutorials, and so look over their website for more how-tos on their product. Okay, Read and Write is the next tool. It is made by a company called Text Help, and let's see. With this, it also has a text-to-speech a feature built in that lets you hear words and passages or even the whole document read aloud with easy-to-follow dual color highlighting, just like Snap and Read had. It can reduce visual stress by using this screen masks and tint. Also, it has text and picture dictionaries, and so if you wanted to get reinforcement from what you're understanding, you can use the picture dictionaries to pair with the regular dictionaries. It also has speech to text, so that's a good tool we'll talk about later in the writing process. It has intuitive word prediction, which helps you to create sentences. It offers suggestions proactively so that you can utilize those words. But we'll get more into some of those writing tools later. We'll come back to Read and Write. But this Read and Write is also a fully featured program. Notice that some students like to use the highlighting tool. So the highlighting tool is over here. And if you have a strategy to build in with your highlighting system, then whatever you highlight in yellow can be curated into an outline, and all the blue items will be curated into another outline. And then so all these items you can go, and with a strategy that you use, you can collect information while you're reading it. All right. Let's go on to the next one. So those were two examples of reading tools that you can use. Reading tools can be used with e-text. And so these are two sources of e-text. I'm going to go over the similarities and differences between both Learning Ally and Bookshare. So if you have a print disability like dyslexia, you can qualify to get access to these two types of e-text sources. Both require this proof of disability, of a print disability like dyslexia or visual impairment, and both provide e-text and audio narration on multiple platform types. It can be via the website or through the tablet app. Both services allow for a book management system built into their portals, and so you can make lists. They can be assigned by teachers if it's a school account, or if it's a personal account, then you can create your own reading lists. So note that I mentioned both a school account and a personal account. So know that even if you have an existing school account, you can apply as a private individual with the print disability and get your own access to the reading material. Because I think if the school is providing you with the access to the material, then they can limit or put only certain things for you to be able to read as e-text. All right, so here are the differences between these two options. Learning Ally requires a yearly fee. The e-text has human narration. The student or user must use its built-in tools to interact with the e-text. You can't use the third-party apps like we just reviewed with the Snap and Read and Write, like you could use with the Bookshare. You can subscribe to their webinars and newsletters. Actually, anybody, you don't have to be a member of Learning Ally to subscribe to their educational webinars and newsletters. They have pretty high quality resources that they send out. And then the second option here on the right is Bookshare. And so Bookshare is free. It utilizes computerized voices and is available in a variety of e-texts like DAISY and HTML, or even Braille. It can be read online with its built-in reader, which is pretty simple. But there are also the third-party apps that we went through to read the e-text, like the Snap and Read and Write. And both of these groups can provide textbooks as e-texts, and so new textbooks may need to be requested. But keep in mind, it takes time for the creation of these e-texts. And so here's a pro tip. You should, if you're using these sources of e-text, then check in with your next term's instructors, and if you know they're going to use a newly published textbook or other book, give advance notice to Learning Ally or Bookshare so you can have this e-text created and ready for when the new term begins. Okay. All right, so those were for people with a print disability. And what if you don't have a print disability, but you still want access to the e-text? You have some other options. So, of course, you know that the library has e-text that you can borrow, but their inventory is limited, and you have to wait for the books to become available if they're in high demand. There are also paid subscription options like Audible and Scribed, audiobooks.com and Book Riot. They're listed on the slide. And right now, note that Audible has posted on their website that they have free e-text books for a variety of ages, all different ages from the early reader simple books to the teen groups. So you have free access right now to their set assortment. It's not every single Audible book, it's a set assortment. And they're doing this while the distance learning is in place. So check that out. It's kind of a nice free feature. And at the top here, you see the public domain books. Now, these are books that are widely available as e-text. Just search for them on the internet. And public domain, it means that the material is not copyright protected anymore. Or maybe it never was, but it's not, at the time that they're pushing it out onto the internet. So several sources are listed here, but there are many others if you search online for public domain or e-text. Also, you see that under YouTube, I listed CC Pros. So CC Pros is kind of fun if you like something a little bit more kind of that just moves along. CC Pros is a YouTube video where they have the caption text of the book at the bottom. So that's another option to check out. All right. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So, I think I missed one. All right. If you have any learning needs in any of these areas, you may benefit from using assistive technology that supports the writing process. If handwriting or keyboarding is difficult, you may want to try the speech-to-text feature. And you can find it built into most word processing programs like Microsoft 365 and the Google Suite, the G Suite, like the Docs and Slides and Sheets. And they are a standard accessibility option. They have a lot of great tutorials online. You search for accessibility and speech-to-text with Google Suite or G Suite, and then their tutorials will pop up. So for the student who can organize their thinking and thoughts in their head, dictation may be a great option to consider and try. So dictation meaning the speech-to-text. All right, typical comprehensive writing supports in our software have these types of options. There's a whole assortment. Obviously, everyone will be a little bit different, but they all have similar goals of helping to support the writer in ways that they're struggling with, whether it is, if you have dysgraphia or dyslexia, other processing concerns, planning issues, memory issues, having a comprehensive writing support tool can be extremely useful. So these tools can make suggestions of words before words are typed incorrectly. They can utilize smart word prediction instead of just corrective underlining. And so for individuals with dyslexia, the spelling is a challenge, so they could benefit from a program that recognizes words that may be sounded out a variety of creative ways. And so let's take a look at these tools. All right. You saw Read and Write earlier, and again, it's by TextHelp. It's an example of a comprehensive program that supports both reading and writing in one software app. So here's the Read and Write toolbar being used in a Google Doc. You can see on the left is a dictionary showing written definitions, and on the right is a picture dictionary reinforcing the definition. In the middle, the purple box shows the spell checker, and Read and Write can read back what has been written for proofreading. Like earlier, some of the other ones, if you put a period in and press space, it will read it back. So check the website of TextHelp's Read and Write for more information and tutorials. You can find it in the Chrome Web Store and the App Store. Right. We are back with another Don Johnston tool. I'm going to show you two of them that support the writing process. This one is Co-Writer. The reading support we saw from them earlier was called Snap and Read. This illustration on the left shows the Smart Word Prediction tool. It makes suggestions based on both the context of the sentence and the letters being typed. And then if you, oops, let me go back. All right. Co-Writer predicts the intended word with a pop-up menu with a list of word suggestions using some grammar smart word prediction to make this work even more effectively. So you may select topic-specific themes to guide the word suggestions. And so some are, you can actually type the theme in. Perhaps you're writing specifically about Abraham Lincoln. And so you type Abraham Lincoln into your theme, and then the blue box that pops up to suggest words will know that you're writing about Abraham Lincoln. Put in some of these types of suggestions. Okay, I'm going to go over one more tool, and then I'll ask for some questions. So this next tool is AT for writing. Have you ever been stumped with what topics or words to use in your writing? So this tool from Don Johnston's is called Word Bank. It can be really helpful with that. So, you can create word banks based on the website you're on, or you can use one of their 5,000 pre-programmed word banks that are built into the program. You can change the layout of the words or sort them by word types. The one you see here in this box, it's kind of like a scattergram, but the words that come up most frequently in this book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, are written biggest. So you see the word Dorothy and book, woodman, story, Oz. Those words are the biggest, so you can infer that they are used the most frequently. And so while you're writing, think, what haven't I talked about yet? Oh, wizard and wizard is, it's wizard and witch are written a couple times in pretty big font. I haven't, in fact, included that in my writing. And so you can then draw from that and use that as part of your brainstorming. Okay. So again, online, they have a pretty good tutorial of this, and it has a comprehensive list of features. So one other feature is if you click on a website instead of using their curated bank, then you can also set up timelines. It can find all the timelines in the web page and create a timeline for you of all the dates. It will show on a map. So if it's like Lewis and Clark and they traveled first across, these northern states and then to Canada, and it might be, if it can pull those locations out, it might be able to plot some of those locations on a map for you to reference, and some other useful tools like that. I think it also can pull some bibliography information for you. Okay. All right. Sunshine, are there any questions relating to the tools I shared?
We do have a question. Should we make sure that AT is in our IEPs/accommodations for high school to get it approved for college? Do we need approval for AT for writing?
That is an excellent question. So the AT being written to the IEP can be part of the documentation you bring to the Student Services Center when you're showing them that you in fact need the AT, and it has a history of being in use in your IEP plan. So those are the types of things that the Student Services Centers, especially the public schools where you have to qualify for and document your disability to show them that you need these accommodations. So putting it in the IEP is an important step if you want to implement the AT in the university setting.
Okay, that was the only direct tool question or AT. The other just question, I'm not sure if Marcy's listening, but you also might be able to answer this one. If a student is too anxious to start college full-time in-person classes, do you ever recommend taking them, taking distant education classes to get used to the college level work?
Actually, Sunshine, I'm going to finish a few more of these slides, and then we should have time at the end to kind of go back, and then we can talk about some of like the big picture and then focus in on certain areas. How about that?
Excellent.
Okay. All right. Okay. So one more tool. I added this one later. This is WordQ. And WordQ is a part of a company called Quillsoft, Quillsoft. And remember, I'm going to post a list of all of these names and resources for you so you don't have to remember how to spell everything. And every single resource will be listed for you with a link for you to click on later. So WordQ is part of the Quillsoft suite of supports. They do have a reading support that we didn't talk about yet. I'm just bringing up their writing support, which is called WordQ, and it operates fairly similarly like some of the tools that you've been seeing. You see that as a student is writing, and partly through the word, a choice box shows up, and this feature in WordQ has a little arrow caret after the word there. So if you're not sure whether this there is the correct there you're looking for, it gives an example of it used in a sentence. So, at the right, it has some of the, another example of some drop-down word choices. And so this is an example of the word prediction feature. It predicts what you might be trying to say and offers you these choices. It also has the speech feedback. So when you finish a sentence, press the period and space bar, it will read it back to you. That's a good piece for proofreading. It will also do, with the proofreading feature, it includes a spelling and grammar check. It has enhanced topical web searches, so based on a certain topic, and help you search for the information you're looking for. It can help to support you in your research and the different projects you're trying to finish, papers, and it also works pretty seamlessly with the Google Docs, and it can be utilized offline if needed. And if you're on computer, tablet, it works in either forms. All right, so the remaining slides I have, I'm going to move pretty quickly through them. Some of them are fairly familiar to you. This one is spelling. So we see spelling features all the time. They're built-in options with all the Google suites, which so many schools are utilizing. If you use Microsoft products, they're 365. Microsoft 365 is a web-based subscription tool, their suite of products, and they have both them and their Google suite have upped their word prediction recently. You might have noticed back last fall that the word prediction got better. Sometimes it got a little glitchy and then it got better, but they're using some artificial intelligence technology now to improve their word prediction. And so it also helps with spelling and grammar. So those are built-in options to your standard word processing tools. But if those aren't supportive enough, or you need it to go across platforms such as through Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, across to different websites that you're on, Grammarly and Ginger are two popular choices, and so check those out. While writing, sometimes in the brainstorming process, mind mapping is a suggested piece. It can, there's actually research that shows this is kind of the natural process of how your brain works in connecting information, connecting memories. It's very similar to how we use mind mapping. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about it, look at the TED Talk I have better at the bottom. It says, want to learn better, start mind mapping. So you can jot down that title and search for it after our talk. And then I listed 4. I could easily put up like a dozen or so mind mapping programs. There are even some specially designed for businesses to push them into collaborating and working together, organizing things in the work office environments. And so I think it's a really good tool to get familiar with and to practice utilizing. So these are 4 different ones that either have free usage or free trials, or might allow you to have 3 active mind maps open at a time before you have to delete one to add another. So these are some to start off checking out. So note-taking becomes a big deal in college. You are transitioning from being a high school student where things are a little bit more scaffolded, and to a university environment where you need to figure out what is the best way to take notes for yourself. If you're utilizing some accommodations where you have a note taker or have some audio recording options, or you are able to get the PowerPoint slides in advance, different tools work differently depending on, have different types of support levels depending on the types of supports you're getting. And so consider each one of these. There are, again, more out there, but this is just a little subset for you to get started with. So I'm just going to touch really quickly on Microsoft's OneNote. It's a platform digital notebook for personalized information gathering and user collaboration. You can capture your thoughts in like a free-form text. You can capture drawings and drop them in there. You can take screenshots and audio notes and embed them into this OneNote. Other ones can do similar things, but one feature I especially liked about OneNote is that it works well with the Microsoft's Immersive Reader. It's their text-to-speech tool, and so if you get the Microsoft Lens app, and the Microsoft Lens is a free app, and you can install on your phone, and you can take pictures of PDFs, papers, a web page on your computer screen, and it can convert it to, it has optical character recognition, convert it into a document for you and read it aloud. So that can be really helpful when you are relying on the text-to-speech. Okay. And another piece of note-taking might be using assistive technology for recording. So here are 3 different options to consider. The Smart Pen LiveScribe has a couple different current form factors that are out there. One is a kind of pen paper-based recording system, and the other one is a pen tablet-based recording system. So look over their tutorials online and figure out whether one of those is attractive and might work for you. Sonosent is one. It's a very comprehensive recording program where you, as the instructor is talking, you can mark, sections of the talk as, with a color coding system. It's a very active recording, note-taking process, and it might be overwhelming for some that have challenges with multitasking and distractibility. But they're coming out soon with a more simple product that is very similar to their basic Sonosent product. It's going to be called Glean, Glean. And I think that is a much more student-friendly product, especially if multitasking is a challenge. And Notability carried over from the previous page. It's you can do note-taking, with that digitally, and it also has the recording feature as well. Okay. And then some people are moving towards, like instead of using pen and paper, they're wanting to use their iPads to jot down notes. And that is a great idea. There's a lot of like between Notability and OneNote, there's a lot of good YouTube videos out there of how to use them for different purposes. So take a look at that. But also some people like a less slippery surface on their iPad. And so this paper-like screen protector can add a little bit more texture so you get some feedback as you're writing with an Apple Pencil. So the Apple Pencil is a pretty smooth tip. And so when it slides across, some people don't feel like they're getting the feedback that they crave from writing with a pencil on paper. So take a look at that. And the advantages of using a digital pencil is it's very agile. So when you're working on iPad, you need to select like highlighting mode and a skinnier tip or a fatter tip and draw a picture, a diagram. It's very agile. So consider a digital pencil. In the planning process, this, is one of those things that Marcy talked about when she was referring to college readiness, the whole independent living skills and being able to self-initiate and follow routines. Well, a lot of us have difficulty following routines and initiating things and staying on top of our schedules. And that's why we write things down. We have Post-it notes and calendars. We have digital calendars. But now we have these great things called personal assistants. So check out these Google Home devices and the Google Assistant app, Alexa and Siri, and see how these, built-in apps can be utilized to help you get things written down and documented. Instead of having to open your phone to write a calendar item in, just say, hey, Siri, I hope I don't turn my Siri on, but, you tell these devices to add something in your calendar. Tell these assistants to set a countdown timer for 10 minutes. There are certain strategies of studying for 25 minutes, focus, and then a 5-minute break. 25 minutes of focus and then a 5-minute break. And so set these personal assistants to help you stay on that type of schedule so your 5-minute break doesn't turn into a 5-hour break. So these are some strategies to use to help you be that independent learner that you want to become. And of course, the digital calendars, write things down because our brains can only hold so much information. That's any of us because we're human. And so use a calendar, write things down, and make lists. And these things are there for you if you can develop the habits of utilizing them. But some projects are just so big, we don't even know how to fathom writing them and getting started with them. And we can have this huge mind block until 2 days before it's due. Then we have this panic moment and we have to get it done. But know that there are these assignment calculators out there that help you to break down these big projects into manageable pieces. And so the example I have here is from the University of Minnesota. And there are many out there. Again, I also put out for our local population, check out the assignment calculator at San Jose State University's website. So here, let's look at the University of Minnesota's option. Here you can select research paper, speech, or lab report. And you enter the start date and a due date. And then you click the calculate button. And then it will break down each of these specialized assignments into the corresponding steps that you need to follow with a date that you need to target getting it done by. So then you can put those dates into your calendar with pop-up reminders. Maybe you do a little bit every day. So in the calendar, you say like 20 minutes a day, work on research paper. And it's this set of 20 minutes from 1 o'clock to 1:20. I go to the library, I'm looking up the books, or I'm doing whatever it is that it's listed for you to do according to their timeline. Okay, so these are great tools to check out and look for. All right, if you are doing college level math and you have difficulty writing things out, maybe the eye tracking is difficult, or whatever your situation is, I found a small subset of things that can be used for high-level math. For typing mathematical notation, I have math type. If you have very complicated math equations, you can try learning LaTeX, LaTeX, or Unicode. Do a search online for cheat sheet for LaTeX or cheat sheet for Unicode, and then you'll print that out, and then it will decode how to type out a complex math formula in a linear fashion. So this is one way to compensate instead of having to write things out. If typing is a better medium for you, you might tap into this option of typing things out in a linear format on your computer for math. Math Talk provides text-to-speech for math. For geometry or other sorts of graphing needs, you can check out GeoBra. It can also do 3D imaging. And calculators. There's a whole array of different kinds of calculators, many more than the ones that I've listed here. But for example, you can find fraction calculators, talking scientific calculators, and then special calculators that you can take pictures of the math problem, and then it will help show you how to solve it. All right, and so the AT strategies, so know that success as a student requires a commitment and follow through. Assistive technology can't cure procrastination or poor study habits, and it can't compensate for poor teaching. But the good news is there are many options for assistive technology that can support you in your goals. With some small changes in how you do things, you can be even more effective as a learner. If you dedicate yourself to acquiring habits that put you on the path toward success with some flexible thinking, a growth mindset, and perseverance, I have absolutely no doubt that you'll get to your goals one step at a time. So here's some of my suggestions. And finally, here we are at our Q&A time with at our ending hour. So if people have time, they can certainly chime in and put their questions in the Q&A. If we don't get to all of that, then we'll be happy to send out the questions with answers typed in, if that's an option for you. So thank you for hanging in there, and thank you for filling out our poll here. We are required to collect certain data to maintain our funding, so really, really appreciate you entering the information into this poll. Of course, here's our information from Marcy, posted on the website. My information to email me directly. Our e-learning website is listed here. I know it was also typed into the chat box. And then, of course, email info@php.com at any time with any sort of question about your situation, special needs related, community support related, education related. We can sort those emails and send them to the people who can address them best. And a big thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. So why don't we plan on addressing the Q&A offline, and we'll post those in the email that we send out to families. Unless Sunshine, do you see any that we can squeeze in just really quick right now?
The two that would be lovely. One is, do colleges teach students how to use the AT software, or do they just give students the accommodations?
I think, and Marcy, please chime in if you know any other information. But the Student Support Center should be able to provide some guidance. If they're supporting the individual through the Americans with Disabilities Act, they need to ensure that the person is in fact getting their accommodation and the required access to their education. what that looks like will just depend on the team that they're interacting with at the university. And so, and it could be something that the child, the student, has to self-advocate for.
Okay. All right. And then real quick, if we can get to it, what is your point of view for students who have Ds on their report card, and should they stay focused for a community college fit?
Marcy, do you want to chime in with that one?
Sure. It really depends on the student and how many Ds and in what classes. There's usually an opportunity for students to take a summer class or to make up for those Ds, to retake that class. Colleges appreciate that, showing that the student made an effort. There's also an additional information section on most of the applications where the students can explain something and talk about why they struggled with that particular class, and then how they retook the class and account for that. Colleges know and understand that kids are kids and they're evolving and they're growing. And they really, it's not so much the challenges like a D, it's what the student did with it that they're going to look for. So it's hard to answer the specific, but that's what I would say about Ds in general. And then also there was that anxiety question. And that's also very specific to, should a student start out at community college to manage anxiety?
It was distant learning, actually. It was distant learning, starting online.
Right. You're right. Yeah. So with that piece, it really depends on the other challenges that a student might have. Because again, back to what I was saying earlier in my talk, is you really have to look at all of the different areas that a student needs to grow in during that gap year or that in-between year before they go off to college. And so I would really just take a look at, is it just the anxiety and doing the distant learning, or are there other issues that would be important to address so that after that year, that student is really confident and ready? So I hope that helps. Thank you, everybody.
So a big thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. We've shared a lot of information with you. It's a lot to take in. And just know that there's a path for everyone. And we hope you feel more equipped and more empowered to find the option that fits you. So take care. We'll see you at a future event.